Sitten vaan odotellaan, että jos tänne tulee joku.
Väkeä saapuu.
Älä mene minnekään.
Okei.
Tonne noin.
Meneekö tuossa sofassa? Ai tuo sofa.
Yes, it seems that it is 10 o'clock in the morning, so we are starting today's talk around Estonian political situation, about the government change and what is why that happened and what's gonna happen next. And this is part of the upcoming Pedersen talks discussion series where we interview and discuss with interesting personalities around different political topics or societal topics around Europe and Finland. And my name is Esa Suominen, and I work as the managing partner of Pedersen Public Affairs here in Finland. And today we are, as I mentioned, discussing the Estonian situation with my colleague Kairi Uustulnd from Pedersen Estonia. Kairi is a managing director of the Estonian Pedersen office, and I think I will give the floor to Kairi to host or to start our discussion by presenting a little bit about the situation and what's going on, and how we are working is that Kairi will hold a small presentation and a little bit give background to the discussion, and then and then the audience is welcome to give their comments in the chat, and then I will lift these up from the chat, and then we will discuss about the topic after the presentation. But welcome everybody. I noticed that we have already almost 20 people joining, so very nice that you are spending this morning here with us. But without further ado, so please, Kairi, floor is yours, and thanks for joining our talk.
Thank you for this nice invitation, Esa. It's always interesting for people like us discuss the political situation, isn't it so? I will give you a very brief intro, and then I will actually be more interested in the questions. I'll be open for them later on, but a short intro. So first, a few words about me. My name, I've been a former chief of staff for 2 prime ministers. My background is for several years in politics and in the public sector. But also I've worked in Eesti Energia as international regulatory affairs manager, and now for the last couple of years running the Pedersen public affairs office in Tallinn. So very briefly about the previous government. We had general elections almost 2 years ago in March 2019. Jüri Ratas was the sitting prime minister, but the elections were actually won by Reform Party and Kaja Kallas. Despite that, Estonia actually has always had a coalition government. So the sitting Prime Minister Jüri Ratas was able to form a coalition together with EKRE. They are far-right national conservatives, and Pro Patria, also national conservatives. Actually, just as a background, Centre Party belongs to Renew group in European political family, EKRE in Independence and Democracy, and Pro Patria in People's Party. So they held together 56 seats in the parliament. It was less than 2 years. It was described as one of these governments where a lot of changes of ministers. Actually, less than 2 years, they had altogether 8 ministers changed. And including that time, they had 4 different ministers for foreign trade and IT. So there were very various reasons for that happening. But let's not discuss that one here. So why this government fell? There were actually several reasons for that, and it's just not one single one. I guess the biggest trigger for that fall was Porto Franco and the corruption scandal around that. Actually, I would even say that about Porto Franco, there were 2 stages. First of all, it was a huge discussion and like a small-scale scandal in Estonia when they received state aid from the crisis fund, like a crisis measure, because it was discussed that maybe real estate is not the kind of business area where you need these kind of COVID-19 crisis measures applied. Second part is when it turned out that there was a probable corruption scandal. And it goes both ways. And what was probably a bit difficult for Centre Party is that Centre Party as an institution received suspicion in corruption, of trading in influence. But it's important to note that their part actually came from the city of Tallinn, where they hold the majority in the city council, and not through the government. The government was affected, but actually through EKRE and their advisor to the minister. Well, it's a complicated story, to say the least. But of course, there were several times during those 2 years where the Prime Minister was forced to admit that they had really big tensions within the government, within the coalition. There was one time when leader of EKRE claimed in an interview in Deutsche Welle that gays should run to Sweden. It was very offensive, of course, to all the minorities, and a huge discussion, and also a discussion about values within the coalition. There were claims that the US elections, presidential elections, were falsified, but without giving any facts or arguments. Again, one of the times that the Prime Minister was forced to say that there are big tensions and like inner discussions within the coalition, which was one thing that was probably very hard for the public in Estonia, was the fact that during 2 crises, we had economic decline and economic crisis at the moment, and the health crisis because of the coronavirus. Estonian Parliament had to hold extraordinary hearings in the Parliament because they were discussing whether a marriage should be only between a man and a woman. Parliament had extraordinary sessions as well, but they were discussing how to tackle the coronavirus epidemic. So it was a bit question of priorities, and there were a lot of sayings and statements in Estonia that maybe this is not the time to discuss that, and what kind of problem does it solve in the first place. But let's not keep ourselves in the past. Now in January, actually, the government was formed a bit later. Kaja Kallas, who won the elections last time, and who Reform Party has 34 seats in the parliament. They formed a coalition together with the Centre Party. It's important for you to know that they both belong to the Renew Europe family, political family in European Parliament. But they are the biggest competitors domestically here in Estonia. So the new government is actually 15 people altogether, Prime Minister plus 7 members from Reform Party and 7 members from the Centre Party. Centre Party did a little reshuffle among their ministerial or ministers, actually. They also brought in some of the experts from outside the party. That was the Minister for Foreign Affairs and also Minister of the Interior. This government, as you can see, has a lot of women, which also describes that we fit very well in the Nordic setting. Our good example from the Finland as well. A lot of females in the government, but of course that's not the only criteria. I think everyone is at best in their expertise. So what has changed and what are the new focuses? At some part, of course, some of the things stay the same. For example, there's in the new coalition agreement, there's also continuous support towards infrastructure projects like Rail Baltica or Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel. There's, of course, huge emphasis on how to tackle the COVID crisis, health crisis. There are several initiatives, for example, how to simplify legislation so that Estonia is internationally attractive. I can see that this is one of the big focuses, to have an analysis of why some of the big companies in the world are choosing their regional headquarters in the neighboring countries. What Estonia has to do to be more attractive? Do we have to change legislation, or do we simply have to do better selling internationally? We can see in the coalition agreement that there is, of course, a strong emphasis on climate targets. They aim to reach climate neutrality by 2050 and local governments to be carbon neutral by 2030. Of course, energy efficient buildings and promise to stop investing into fossil fuels. Internationally, I think this government is more open and has actually very good connections and network all over the world. So it's also what to expect from this new government. Even though they are tackling two crises at the same time, one can say that we only expect them to solve this crisis, focus on people's jobs, focus that the economic recovers really well and quickly. But we can also see that actually the expectations are quite high. But of course, with the limited resources, both financially and also given the situation that everyone is in, it is quite a challenging target. We can see also now, as a change, a very big focus on e-solutions, on digital investments, because Estonia is known as a digital frontrunner. But in the last couple of years, we can say the focus has not been quite there. But if you stop investing and developing your e-solutions, your e-services, whether in the public sector or elsewhere, you are no longer a frontrunner pretty quickly. You need to keep investing, keep developing, because otherwise you are just lagging behind. So this is maybe also one of the things that can be seen as a change. Actually, I will at the moment stop here and actually let you ask the questions if you have.
Thank you, Kairi. Yes, there is, or we have already received some questions beforehand, and I also have some questions or comments to the presentation. And thanks for a good brief. One thing which I think like the viewers will be interested is that after the election, it was that although Reformi won, so it was then the case that this Ratas government became this sort of a right-wing conservative government instead of being, a grand coalition of the two parties, as is now the case. So what's actually different here now? Was it basically that it would have been impossible for Jüri Ratas to continue as prime minister if Reformi and Centre would have made a coalition pact right after the election, or what was basically the reason that first it was impossible to do Reformi Keskerakond, and now all of a sudden it was possible? So how would you comment on this? Was it only about Ratas's personality, or was there any other issues also?
I think the first thing what you need when forming a government is you need to have the will and the trust on each side. When right after the last elections, it was actually interesting that there were several options for several coalitions. And I guess everybody wanted to discuss and have the first initial understanding, where is the common ground, and probably Jüri Ratas just played it really well to see that he will continue in the next government. He was probably quicker, maybe put a better proposal on the table. But here we can see that this time, and we can see it from both sides, the interest was sincere, and there was a will to work together. And I think they started off with really good understanding of each other.
Yes. Andrei Nahkala is having an interesting question, as well as Kari Välimäki on the chat. And if we start with Andrei's question, is that it's interesting that the government focuses so much on infrastructure rather than improving services, or like talking about that, like is there a popular support, or what's basically the reason? And this is basically linked also to the Mr. Välimäki's question about the tunnel. Like, I guess what he is asking is that, are they serious?
All right, let's start with the services first. As Andrei's background is also in the healthcare sector, of course there are a lot of not focuses, but a lot of promises in the coalition agreement concerning the healthcare sector. And as this is one of the crises they need to solve, of course, COVID is the one part of it. But secondly, there's also, for example, they support healthcare services based on genetic data. Estonia has a very good gene bank, and they want to even increase the gene donors. I'm a gene donor myself, and they want to personalize this healthcare. It's definitely more interest in that area as well. They support for doctors, for example, remote consultations. There needs to be an infrastructure placed for that, especially at the times we are in. I think this is in a way also inevitable, but also a kind of logical step to go forward. In healthcare sector, they also had strong support on cancer control program. So it's yeah, maybe I should have listed a lot of more services. So it's those infrastructure projects are actually a little bit of ongoing. Rail Baltica is it has been the priority infrastructure project for a decade probably. When it comes to Helsinki-Tallinn tunnel, well, that would be nice. But it's definitely that we won't see that in the next 2 years, and this government is in the office. But in a way to continue studies to see if it is feasible and what do you actually need for that to happen. That's actually sort of the logical part of the future Rail Baltic project as well. Then Helsinki will also be connected, and not only Helsinki, but your northern towns in Finland as well, be connected with Lithuania and Warsaw and Germany through Rail Baltica by rail.
Yeah.
This is of course at the moment feasibility studies and all of that.
Yeah, hopefully it will be reality at some point. At the moment, I still think that might be when we are pensioners, so we can perhaps ride in the tunnel. Let's see. You're actually also already answered some part of Mikko Ferström's question about the innovative treatments. So at least what we can pick up from here is the cancer control and consultations and the gene bank and the personalized healthcare, at least, which will be on the agenda. I'm also I'm personally interested also that about the as you mentioned, it seems that this Portofranco case was like the cherry on top of the cake, like in a way that, okay, there was already a lot of trouble within the coalition even before this Portofranco real estate scandal, which then kind of and which led to both to Tallinn city government and then to the national government. Whereas it's here now seems that the prime minister sort of perhaps he could have evaded the situation, since it was actually not the national government's or Centre Party ministers sort of scandal on a national level, but like a little bit, but the party in the local level more sort of breached the trust there. But how do you see, will this have any influence on the city politics or the domestic or the local politics in Tallinn? Will the Centre Party have problems or a lack of support there, or is the key constituencies, which I understand are mostly Russian speakers, so are they affected by these sort of scandals?
When Centre Party received this suspicion, and also their Secretary General received suspicion, Secretary General stepped down the same day. But the investigation is ongoing, and actually we don't know where it lands, how this will go and how the court trial will go. Of course, this is a long process. When it comes to Tallinn, there's only partial information at the moment. There are no changes currently, but we have actually local government elections in autumn. So about half a year until the next elections. We'll see how it goes from there. Centre Party is still strong, but of course the other parties have gained popularity in Tallinn as well. So it's they still, I think they are on the edge of having still the majority in Tallinn, but the others want to challenge them, of course.
How about has there been any new polls or approval ratings? Like, how is the new government starting? Do people favor this new option?
In a way, yes. I think this is very natural and logical in politics everywhere, where every time a new government comes, you have high expectations, whoever they are, and sometimes people just simply want change, and they hope that something good will come out of this new government. So expectations are high. Support is good. They have had, I think, a very good stable, a good start. So let's see. I think it's still too early. Still too early.
Yeah. There's an interesting question, right? Political question from a member of the parliament, Jouni Ovaska, and then also Kari Välimägi there. Like, how does the new, which would have been my question also, basically what Jouni is asking, is that how does the new opposition look like? And especially, I think, like, everybody's interested in, like okay, EKRE kind of had their moment in the government, and now after little less than 2 years, so it's like after 2 years, like now the show is over for at least time being, but they still like seem to be carving out the reasonable support in Estonian population. And how do you see them behaving in the opposition, and how the opposition will work now against this grand coalition? And also, like, as Kari Välimäki is asking also, is that the Estonian political map kind of is much more right-wing leaning than the other Nordic countries. So how do you think that? Is there a chance here for Social Democrats or the Greens to kind of make a comeback?
First of all, when we discuss EKRE, then when they were in the government, they had this stage where always, of course, as ministers, as government party, they were asked several questions about positions, about their attitude, about their statements. So they were constantly in media and they were very, very vocal. And sometimes they were opposing even the coalition agreement and opposing the values within that coalition agreement. So in a way, whether they didn't care or they just were very, very bold, going against the agreements that they had actually signed up for. At the moment, yes, they don't have this big stage anymore. At the moment, it's quieter than usual, but it's still the first weeks in the opposition. Social Democrats, of course, I wouldn't count them out, no way. Of course, they are there and they will continue quite definitely in the next parliament as well. This time it was during this recent government change, it was pretty much the only hope for the Social Democrats to be in the government was a coalition between Reform Party, Isamaa and Social Democrats. But it really wasn't a possibility because, first of all, Isamaa didn't want that. They very much wanted to continue with Centre Party and EKRE. And secondly, Isamaa is actually also torn. They have very big internal discussions and difficulties. And even the last time, during the last year, and actually throughout the 2 years of this last government, Isamaa did not vote as one. So they had value conflicts within their faction and within their party, actually. So they are probably dealing with that. Social Democrats will stay and will come back.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, since, from the Finnish point of view, I could imagine that if you have let's say a populist party which is in the government, so that's usually the place where we kind of would imagine that this is the place to kind of tame the former sort of a protest party. That okay, you are kind of giving responsibility, and you're kind of taking them in, and but it sounds like that in the Estonian case. So this was more Trump-like phenomena where you actually sort of use that platform. You get not perhaps so much to the actual governing, but more for sort of. As a platform for your political message. And then if I understand that they are now still they are the main opposition party, I guess, for the new government. So one would kind of, from the Finnish perspective, think that, okay, first they were silent and now they are vocal because they can now attack against this more liberal government and the Centre Party for breaking the coalition with the conservative parties. But it's very interesting to hear that this is actually not the case in Estonia. It's vice versa. What would be sort of a logic on this end? So this was interesting. We have also,
yeah. Very shortly, it's just actually that you cannot underestimate EKRE either. They are most probably preparing for the local elections, so it's work on the field.
Kati Newman has a good question about that, or like comment that there seems to be a quite much more clearer commitment for the combat against climate change and greener future. And so is this something where there is clearly a bigger sort of like, is this the one where there is most difference between the former and the current government?
This is one of them. The difference is this is definitely one of them. Now we can more and more see clearer goals. Of course, the recent government discussed this as well, but we have, you know, these even these statements that stop producing oil shale power by 2035. It has not been this explicitly said out loud. There is also a future facility, a future fund that will tackle the transformation for climate change and also digital change. They will have a separate fund. They will work out the concept by the end of April, how this will work, who can apply, and what are the long-term goals. This is definitely a long-term vision. To also support local initiatives, but to also support products, innovation, and this kind of innovative digital solutions.
So like the Finnish Climate Fund, which is the state-sponsored fund, which is sort of also like to invest in climate-friendly technologies and industries, etc. That's interesting. Now that you are talking to Finnish people, so everybody is naturally interested in the Estonian tax policies for the coming years. And especially perhaps, you know, now we are in a situation where COVID restrictions are, if not banning to travel, but at least making it much more harder. And but hopefully we will be getting rid of these when the vaccinations are starting to roll, and hopefully summer will be already better. But naturally, like we are interested that is there any plans for the new government to introduce some changes to the taxation, let it be services or let it be labor, or then of course alcohol?
At this stage, they have promised in the coalition agreement that they will not make any changes in the tax system to provide stability and, in a way, like it's a tax peace in Estonian. And at the moment, they see that just there are other priorities, and also in this crisis, maybe one of the reasons for that tax piece and not changing anything is the fact that Reform Party and Centre Party have had different approaches to tax policy. Reform Party with their libertarian view, lower similar tax base, and provide help for those in need, where Centre Party favors progressive tax, thank you, and not to put effort and time in these discussions and debates at the time where you actually need this energy somewhere else.
Yeah. What's your view on the, like, let's say the Centre Party future, like politically, in a way that is it possible that we will see the return of Jüri Ratas, or was this whole game over for him for good in the Estonian politics now. Of course, he's an MP, I guess, still, but or will there be leadership changes in the other parties, and who's going to be who are going to be the new tough, or like, let's say, visible and strong personalities?
Jüri Ratas will continue in the parliament. He decided himself that he does not want to be part of the government coalition. I'm sure he would have been welcomed there very much. But he will lead this coalition delegation, let's say, call it this way, in the parliament. You need to have strong personnel in the parliament as well. He will be in the leadership, in the management of the parliament quite soon. I don't see that there would be a change for Jüri Ratas, because he's still at the moment the only leader in the party. And the next in line probably would have been Kadri Simson, but who is a commissioner at the moment in Brussels. And the next in line also Mailis Reps, who was the former Minister for Education and Research, and but she is also tackling with one of the criminal proceedings herself for misusing public money.
Yeah.
So probably no change in that sense.
I think one more thing, which we also received a little bit in advance, was that like, although it's not a party political issue, but what's the general attitude among the Estonian population about the government's handling of the COVID and the response to COVID? The situation was quite good for a long period of time, but now in the end of the last year, it seems to be like a little bit deteriorating. But like, what are the moods? Are people nervous, or does this show in at least their tensions or criticism, or like which kind of measures have been sort of seen as good or not so good? How would you comment on this sort of?
We have the infection rate quite high since November, and there have been some of the restrictions probably maybe came a bit too late, but some of the restrictions have also been eased quite recently. I think what the Estonians are very critical, but everyone in their own sense. Some of them says that we need to close down everything, total lockdown for 2 weeks, and there's a lot of people who say that there are too many restrictions. Why do the restaurants need to be closed at 9 o'clock in the evening? So there is a huge clash in the expectations. I think what Estonians don't see at the moment is that comparing to a lot of countries in Europe and around the world, I don't think we have that many restrictions. And we can go to the office or hairdressers if we need to, which is not the case in several countries. But what the government has said, tackling the COVID crisis, one of the things is our actions in preventing the COVID-19 disease from spreading will be based on science and evidence, which means that when we are discussing when anyone is discussing restrictions, they keep asking, is there evidence that this will actually help spreading the virus? So there are a lot of discussions. Our researchers, our academics, there's a lot of discussion. And we know that At the same time, when they are discussing restrictions, and at the moment one of the academics has told that we need to close down schools to go again to distance learning because the infection rate among young children have increased a lot. And there's of course the other side who says that maybe we need to close down entertainment before schools. And what will this educational knowledge gap mean for our kids in the future? Because when kids are home, then a lot of parents have to be home. The parents have to tackle their work and be a teacher at the same time. Who will suffer? And so what Kaja Kallas has told before that there are a lot of invisible victims that we don't see behind every restriction, and we need to consider their interests as well. When she told about restaurants, it may be entertainment for some people, but it's work, jobs, and salary for the others. So it's definitely not an easy challenge. And everyone is carefully looking because the expectations don't match at all.
Thank you. I think there doesn't seem to be now more sort of audience questions. So I have a final question, and then we perhaps ask for a commentary, and then we perhaps wrap up unless some additional comments or questions pop up to the chat. Now we have the brand new coalition. The local elections are coming. There are ambitious goals in the program, but of course only 2 years time before the next general election. So, but what would you recommend? Like now, if let's say we are joined here today by active people who work in public affairs or PR or are decision makers and influencers themselves. So what should we be aware of? What to follow in the Estonian politics or Estonian business and society in the coming months or years? What will be the sort of things which you see as important in the Estonian society, like what to follow and what to be aware of? What's something which you would either want to or think that is necessary for your northern neighbors to kind of keep an eye on?
I am sure that this government will very strongly focus on the competitiveness of Estonia. They need to analyze and get answers to the questions. What are the challenges for the other companies to get their regional headquarters here or to open their facilities here in Estonia? This is definitely, they are looking at Finland, they are looking at Latvia and Lithuania and Sweden, of course. This is definitely one of the reasons. So we can expect, hopefully, some change in attitude. Also, that Estonia wants to reassure that we are open. We are open for foreigners. We are defending everyone's human rights, including minorities. And this is actually said out loud in the coalition agreement as well. We want to be attractive. Estonia wants to be attractive business environment who values each and every person. So I would say that when the neighbors talk to each other, so it's the international competitiveness, definitely one of the things. But it is very important, of course, to keep our good relations with Finland. You cannot take anything for granted. You need to build into that relationship as well. And we saw that we had this time digital visits, but the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and also Minister for Defense, everywhere. Finland and Latvia are definitely the first ones to visit, both of them, to keep those good relations with our allies and friends. And on the third point, I would say that if we start investing again in our digital solutions, our e-services, we speed up the development of e-state. Hopefully we can have some sort of initiatives or programs that we can also export or try out together. Like we have common programs with Finland. We have e-prescriptions, and we recognize them in both countries. Digital signature, stuff like that are innovative, forward-looking, and make the lives for our people easier.
So digital practicality, and this is perhaps also what we have been doing here today, this morning. I don't see any additional questions at the moment, so perhaps we will wrap up for the day. And thank you, Kairi, for talking to us and discussing about the situation. This was really interesting to hear, and we will be eyeing on also the local election situation and the developments there during the year. So perhaps we will, after those elections are done, so perhaps we will do a second update on how are things looking now and what happened in the bigger cities and what kind of meaning does it perhaps have for Finnish cities also, like Helsinki and others. But thank you also for the active participants in the chat. So I think we got a nice overview on the situation, and I guess everybody's a little bit more, how to say now, more aware on what's going on and what will happen next. But aitäh, Kairi, and all the participants, and I think that next stop is back to work. And thanks for this morning.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.